Penn State is getting ready to name some of the winners in its key position battles leading up to this season, and the results, they're going to surprise you.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The offensive line battle has an interesting twist to it. We're going to talk about RB3 as well, and the underdog candidate who's going to return to the status that he had once upon a time. And quarterback 2, QB2, looks like it's all but certain here. You are locked on to Penn State football. As always, thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Friendly reminder to let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the conversation. QB2, RB3, offensive line. We'll talk about one other key position battle that is quietly unfolding. But it's important to talk about Drew Allar's backup first. And what's surprising about this result is how fast it seems like Penn State is ready to make a decision here. I did not think there would be a definitive result here. I thought that this was something that would carry on to into the season. That, yeah, we don't have a QB2. We don't know who it is. And James Franklin said at the most recent press conference that they are very close. And they were actually so close to a point that they almost named the immediate backup to Drew last week. And all the signs point to probably the player that everybody assumed it was going to be. And that's Ethan Grunkemeyer. I thought this battle was going to carry out over time, that this would have gone into maybe week 3 or week 4 of the season, but there is going to be a clear depth chart. It's not going to be a 2A, 2B type of situation. The writing's been on the wall for the past couple of weeks. At practice, again, these are 15 to 20 minute sessions that we get to see, but when they break up into the 1s and the 2s, the reserves, it has always been Grunkemeyer and it's always been Smolik. Grunkemeyer with the 1s and 2s and Smolik with the reserves. That's telling. That is the sign. So what ultimately transpired was, Grunkemeyer had a late surge in the summer and significantly improved as far as his timeline goes. But this has bigger indications than, okay, Grunk's QB2, so then that's it. This is done. This is over with. I don't think so if Penn State wants to handle this the right way. If James Franklin wants to have this set up properly, because this has long-term implications. It's not only about this season, it's what happens down the road. Because this is a pending QB1 battle if you handle it correctly. So you don't just want Jackson Smolik to go into the transfer portal. That's going to hurt your depth chart. You want him around and see if you can keep him and not just hand the job over to Ethan Grunkemeyer, unless Grunkemeyer does take so much of a step forward that you can do just that. And that very well may happen. Grunk has the higher ceiling. But Smolik, the advantage that he had was the experience. He was probably better in the film room. But Grunkemeyer is starting to progressively chip away as they continue to take those reps. So Penn State's depth chart is going to look like this for this season. Drew Allar, Ethan Grunkemeyer, Jackson Smolik, most likely a Beckham Kritza. Kritza's not going to see the football field this season, but I think it's worth noting that the true freshman would be QB4 in this case. It's surprising for me for how quickly they made this decision and that they're going to do it definitively, because this kind of shuts a couple of doors unless they decide to reopen them. If they say that, yeah, Smolik and Grunk are going to have another quarterback battle for the starting job. Because again, what that does long term is it potentially hurts your depth chart. If you're going to outright say, hey, Grunk's the guy, we're going to go with him, then I got to imagine in this transfer portal NIL era, I don't blame Jackson Smolik for going into the transfer portal when he would have 3 years of eligibility remaining, if I'm not mistaken, because he'd get that medical red shirt. So he's going to go to another school, and then that leaves you long term with Grunk, Kritza, Troy Hune. You don't have Peyton Falzone anymore. But this is the right move if Grunk is ready short term. See how you handle it long term. But Grunk gives you I think a little more athleticism. I think he's more of the athletic quarterback. If he's there with being able to read a defense, then that's where they want to see things unfold. That's where they wanted to see the consistency. Can you make the appropriate reads? Do you get confused? And that's how every quarterback battle has gone to an extent over these past few cycles. Trace McSorley and Tommy Stevens. Then Sean Clifford and Will Levis, Drew Aller and Bo Pribula. Is who's better at just overall running the offense and who's better at reading a defense. Because you can make the argument that Tommy Stevens was more athletic than Trace McSorley. But who had a better idea of the game? Who was that better field general for Penn State's offense? And that's how it's looking in this case. So Grunk's looking to be QB2 based on what we've seen in practice. It would surprise me if they come out and they name Jackson Smolik. But what it also does is it prolongs this quarterback battle into spring football, maybe even over the summer next year. But I know Penn State's not thinking that long term, at least right now when they have a national title run in front of them. But they should be. They should be, because it puts you in a much better situation if you can find a way to keep Smolik around. But if Grunk really moves that much forward, then I don't know what you can do. You don't want to just keep Smolik around just because, just for the sake of it. You do run that risk. So that's what everybody was thinking. RB3 is not the case, though. Some people like Corey Smith. I'm in favor of Quinton Martin. It's neither of those guys from the looks of it. And he's honestly been really impressive with the adversity that he's dealt with. I'm going to tell you about who the projected winner for that RB3 spot, the coveted position out of these battles, who is going to win it. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches for just 24 hours. FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. Do you think it's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson? I mean, there's plenty of quarterbacks to choose from. Joe Burrow, maybe Patrick Mahomes gets back to that status. You can crown your champion in August. So the Eagles and the Chiefs were just in the most recent Super Bowl. Is it the Bills' turn to break through? Or the Ravens? Maybe it's the Lions, or maybe you have a dark horse contender. And speaking of dark horses, you can parlay your division winners, even your dark horse choices, into one bet. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. That is over at FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Probably the least favored candidate here in the RB3 competition is emerging. And again, nothing is definitive, but based on what I am seeing at practice and watching each player just kind of go through the motions, go through the repetitions of the drills that they're currently involved in, it's honestly easy to tell who is currently projected to be that winner. I think it's safe to declare from my point of view that RB3 is going to be Cam Wallace again. Cam Wallace at the most recent practice impressed me. The vision, the patience. Talk about three-star prospect. How he flew under the radar that he did, and his primary attribute was speed. So for Wallace to continue to develop these other running back traits, the patience, the vision, the footwork, rather than just being a speed threat, he's added significant weight. And for somebody that dealt with a significant season-ending injury, I think that's why everybody, for the most part, maybe not everybody, some people probably said, hey, Wallace, just keep an eye on him. If he's healthy, he probably works his way back into the lineup. And there was always that reservation for me that ultimately he would be, they're going to rotate them, but you also want consistency. And it's the same thing that goes with the offensive line. Just because there is a winner, they are still going to do rotations, but it's not going to be a revolving door, because then that prevents consistency, continuity. So you want one person to primarily take those reps, and then you have your remaining depth. I mean, Penn State, I don't think could have gone in an incorrect direction any sort of way, whether it was Quinton Martin, who I think has the most upside. But James Franklin alluded to guys dealing with bumps and bruises and that nature, and then all three of them were conveniently absent from one of the recent practice sessions that we were at. But then this most recent one from this week, Wallace was there, Martin was there, Smith was there, and Cam Wallace performed the best of the three. And it was clear they were doing some different team drills, blocking. It was a 3-on-3 with some linebackers. Wallace was having a great performance, reading the lanes very well, taking off. Just the way that he sees the game right now in year 3 is impressive for where he is at after dealing with the injury that he did, a substantial long-term injury, and he's back. He's back right now, and he's ready. He looks very close. I would say it's hard to tell that he even had a significant injury from a season ago. Cam Wallace is my projected winner at RB3. Who knows if Quinton Martin or Corey Smith are able to close the gap. But right now, I would look at it as Cam Wallace is the RB3 behind Singleton and Allen, the same way that it was a season ago, and they already trusted him. They were giving him reps in West Virginia. It's not like they tried to work him in progressively. No, he was already handling some sort of responsibility. He gets smarter with that extra year of experience. So it's a testament to the adversity that he's gone through to put himself back in position to be that guy. Again, things could change. This is why you come to this show to listen for my perspective. My perspective says that it's going to be Singleton and Allen, then Cam Wallace, and then probably Quinton Martin and Corey Smith end up rotating as the RB4. So they're the RB4A, 4B. They will get theirs, but they don't get as big of a piece of the pie as they would. Again, I like the upside of Quinton Martin. That would have been my prediction early on, but just as we continue to, it's the same thing we saw with QB2 here at these practice sessions, where Smolik separate with the reserves, and Grunkemeyer just continues to work with the 1s and 2s. Same deal. Wallace working with the 1s and 2s alongside Singleton, Allen, Drew Aller, Ethan Grunkemeyer, and Quinton Martin's not over there in that group. Corey Smith isn't over there in that group. It's Wallace. They're over with the reserves. That's telling. Those are the kinds of indications that you have to look for here. But then seeing it, it's not just a couple of handoff timing drills, some swing passes, some very basics. Penn State actually got into some really interesting drills, and Wallace just outperformed a lot of people. And I want to talk about running back overall. I like what I've seen from Katron Allen too. When James Franklin says that Katron Allen has taken that next step, he really has. Allen, phenomenal pass blocker. Reps going up against the linebackers and taking on the blitz. And Allen almost acts like an extra offensive lineman at times, as he should. He's kind of that power back, even though Singleton weighs more. But Allen's phenomenal in pass blocking. And the difference here is going to be him as a receiver. I know that we've seen him in some. Nicholas Singleton is going to be that true hybrid running back. You know, you put him out into the slot, wide receiver type. Maybe you even rotate him out further. But Allen, don't just think of him as a battering ram, that he's going to be the power back. He is going to be used in a similar capacity. Singleton will be that true receiving threat out of the running back spot. Don't overlook Allen, is my point. As a pass catcher, as a blocker, he's checking all the boxes right now where he's not a liability or he's inconsistent. He looks the part of that complete running back. And it is going to be thunder and lightning again, but a better version of thunder and lightning between Singleton and Allen. Seriously, if I'm Cam Wallace and if I'm his camp, his family and friends, I'd be proud. I'd be really proud, because that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of grit, toughness. It's not just that it's the injury. To come back from the injury the way that he did, and to really solidify himself, not as a distant competitor, but as somebody that maybe we should have favored all along. And we were just kind of saying, hey, the injury here, it's probably going to hold him back. It didn't. It didn't. He is going to play, and he's going to be at least in the rotation. Again, maybe things change. We don't see every single practice session, obviously. Maybe Martin emerges and strings together a couple good practices that just put him back, and maybe it's a 3A, 3B. I don't know. I think I've seen enough to say that I'm confident that Wallace is that backup to Singleton and Allen. It's a good problem to have. It is a good problem to have. Because then if Wallace is unavailable, you have Martin. If Martin's unavailable, you have Smith. And the freshmen between Tyke Hayes and Jabri Wallace-Coleman, those guys, they just need the reps. They just need the time. They're not too far off in terms of their timeline. For the offensive line, you have a right guard starting battle going on between Anthony Donkoh, Cooper Cousins, who more people assume would have been a starter this season. He might be on the bench. But there's one other contender that makes this interesting, and maybe Nolan Rucci's spot isn't even safe. We're going to talk about this offensive line battle that's not just about one position, and one other position battle on defense that people should be aware of. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is the next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under the tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes, and effects can last up to 36 hours, so you stay confident, you stay in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head over to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That is Rugiet, Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. It's not just about right guard, it's about right tackle as well. Again, Penn State has this flexibility. This is one of the top offensive lines in the country for a reason, and very well could, and honestly, it's my expectation that they win the Joe Moore Award or get very close. This team has the depth. They're 3 deep at some spots. And the fact that you could have Anthony Donkoh at right guard, you could have him at tackle, you could have Nolan Rucci, Cooper Cousins might be on the bench. Right guard is not the only spot that's up for grabs here. Nolan Rucci has to make sure that he is playing to the best of his ability, because then Anthony Donkoh will kick back out to right tackle and Nolan Rucci will start at right guard. So it's this kind of one man versus another versus another versus another, that if Nolan Rucci is not performing well, you move Donko back and then Cooper Cousins becomes the starting right guard. But there's one other player that I don't think many of us would have considered in this case. At least I didn't. I thought he was going to go through a developmental process, but he does come in with a strong pedigree, a strong resume, and that's TJ Shanahan. TJ Shanahan is a former 5-star offensive lineman. The old rivals had him ranked as that, so he was a consensus for industry 4-star, but at one point in time, he was ranked as a 5-star, one of the top offensive linemen in the country. So he shouldn't be looked over in this case. And there is a 3-man battle here between Donko, Cooper Cousins, and TJ Shanahan for that right guard spot. I don't think Shanahan's going to win it, though, because once upon a time, Donko was considered, and it's not just being considered, he was performing at this level. James Franklin said it, that Donko was one of the best offensive linemen in the country before the injury. He was definitely playing as one of the best offensive linemen on the team. Who knows in retrospect compared to competition all the way across the country, nationally. So James Franklin's going to obviously hype up his players, but I do agree that I think Donko last season was Penn State's best offensive lineman until the injury, and then Nolan Rucci comes in and offers at least comparable performance. It was at least maybe a small step backwards, maybe, But Penn State's offensive line gelled so well in the postseason. Their best performances came against the best front sevens. Oregon, SMU, Boise State. Even though they lost to Notre Dame, and even though they lost to Oregon, those were some of the best performances by the offensive line specifically. I know moral victories don't really matter in this case, but at least it is a nice setup. It is a nice bridge going into this season where 80%, you only lose Sal Wormley. You get Donko back from injury on an appropriate timeline, right? Was he going to be back by week 4, week 5? No, it's the same thing with Cam Wallace. Donko is back now, and he's performing well now. I got to imagine, this is my projected offensive line. Drew Shelton, Vanga Ioane, Nick Dawkins. I think Anthony Donkoh is going to be right guard. I do, because I don't know how you keep him out of the lineup. And Nolan Rucci performed well enough to where I don't think the right tackle spot's in danger for him. But it's a balancing act. You have to find the best 5, not necessarily who overall is the most talented at each spot, but which 5, because it's one offensive line comprised of 5 starting players. And I'm not trying to make this some in-depth conversation about, trying to break this down. But Phil Troutwine's job is to find the 5 players that have the best chemistry together, that work together the best as a unit. It very well might be Cooper Cousins and Anthony Donkoh. Maybe it's TJ Shanahan and Nolan Rucci. If you want my opinion, I think because of what Anthony Donkoh just gives you overall as a player, if he and Nolan Rucci can play in sync together on that right side, that's your best duo. If they don't have that chemistry, if they don't gel together, then you got to look somewhere else. Cooper Cousins and Anthony Donkoh at right guard and right tackle make a ton of sense. And that's how it was at the beginning of the season. It wasn't until Anthony Donkoh's injury that Nolan Rucci emerged. There was a clear winner. It was Anthony Donkoh, and they didn't rotate. They didn't do all this preparation. It wasn't this back and forth. They said Anthony Donkoh's right tackle. And it wasn't until later in the season when he dealt with that injury, unfortunately, and had to miss the rest of the season, that Penn State, they didn't get lucky. They prepared for that. That's why you build depth. They went and evaluated Nolan Rucci and said, this guy is going to be an important addition to our team, whether he starts or whether he's a depth piece. And at the end of the day, he was both. And it paid off for Penn State to get to that semifinal. Nolan Rucci was that important. I don't know how you can bench Nolan Rucci. Cooper Cousins has not played a lot of football to this point. Nolan Rucci has. Anthony Donkoh has. They're both the veterans at this point. There is no shame in having Cooper Cousins be a backup guard at any of the spots. Right guard, left guard, center. He's going to be a backup center. Something else to keep an eye on. If Vanga Ioane, if Nick Dawkins, let me start there. Nick Dawkins happens to miss a play or goes out or anything like that. Vanga Ioane moves over to center, and then Cooper Cousins goes in at guard. That's how I'm seeing, based on some repetition in the order of everything, that's what that would look like. So I almost think you need Cooper Cousins for that versatility because he can play left guard, center, and right guard. You don't really have that option with Anthony Donkoh. So I think Cooper Cousins' versatility is kind of more important for the depth chart overall than him being a consistent starter, at least for this season. He's All-America caliber when he reaches his peak, and he's a backup. Same thing with TJ Shanahan. They're both backups potentially on this team. So that's what the offensive line looks like for me. Shelton, Ioane, Dawkins, Donkoh, Rucci. I think that's the best 5 together. One important position battle that is being overlooked that I do want to mention that I don't think is going to be decided anytime soon is that strong safety spot. Some people like Dejuan Lane. King Mack returns from Alabama. You also have Antoine Belgrave-Shorter. That's the interesting piece here, is that Belgrave-Shorter continues to improve and get better, and he's quietly having a really good spring camp, summer, fall. He's stringing along all of these seasons together, this offseason, the periods of each offseason, to where he might start as that strong safety. So don't overlook him, but I don't have enough evidence to say, hey, this is my projected winner here, because it is that close. It could be Dejuan Lane, it could be King Mack, it could be Antoine Belgrave-Shorter. I think they're all even right now. Something we're going to keep an eye on as we're closer to Penn State versus Nevada. Hey, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Friendly reminder, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Thank you for checking out this episode, for being a supporter. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. We are daily here on Locked On Nittany Lions, all things Penn State football, recruiting, wrestling, basketball, you name it, right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.